We all make mistakes. Maybe you sent a text to the wrong person, lost your keys, or miscalculated your budget for the month. Annoying? Sure. Costly? Sometimes. But compared to the errors we're about to explore, your little slip-ups look like pocket change, because history is full of mistakes so massive, so unbelievable, that they didn't just cost thousands or millions, but billions, sometimes even hundreds of billions. These weren't just accounting errors or minor accidents. They were the kinds of mistakes that destroyed entire companies, shook global markets, and in some cases, changed the course of history. Take this, for example. In Japan, a trader once added just one wrong zero to a stock order. That single keystroke caused chaos, wiping out hundreds of billions in market value in a matter of minutes. Or NASA, who spent years preparing for a mission to Mars, only to lose a $370 million spacecraft because someone forgot to convert units from imperial to metric. And then there are mistakes of arrogance. Kodak invented the digital camera decades before it became mainstream. Instead of embracing it, they buried the invention. And that decision eventually killed a company once worth $131 billion. These aren't just financial disasters. They're human stories of pride, miscommunication, greed, and sometimes pure bad luck. So today, on Weirdly Global, we're counting down the 10 most expensive mistakes ever made. Stick around until the very end, because our final story isn't just about billions lost. It's about how fear of change can completely destroy even the most powerful empires. Let's get started. The $617 billion typo, Mizuho Securities. Our first story takes us to Japan in 2005. Picture the trading floor of the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Fast-paced, chaotic, with billions of yen moving in and out every second. One trader at Mizuho Securities was tasked with selling a share of JCOM, a new recruitment company making its debut on the exchange. The intended order was simple: sell one share for 610,000 yen, about $5,000 at the time. But instead of typing in 1, the trader entered 610,000. And instead of entering the price as 610,000 yen per share, he accidentally listed them at just 1 yen each. In other words, he put 610,000 shares up for grabs at practically zero cost, when only 14,500 shares even existed. The error instantly threw the market into chaos. Traders pounced on what looked like the deal of the century. Mizuho desperately tried to cancel the order, but the Tokyo Stock Exchange's system at the time didn't allow it. Within minutes, the value of the entire market collapsed by a jaw-dropping $617 billion. The firm itself ended up losing hundreds of millions buying back shares to cover the blunder. The exchange came under fire for having outdated systems. Lawsuits dragged on for years. And the poor trader? Let's just say his career didn't exactly survive. One extra zero, one misplaced digit. And suddenly, one of the largest financial markets in the world was shaken to its core. NASA's $370 million math error. Let's leave Earth and head to space, or at least where NASA hoped to go. In 1999, NASA launched the Mars Climate Orbiter, a sleek spacecraft designed to study the Martian atmosphere. The mission cost $370 million, and years of planning went into it. Expectations were sky high. But when the orbiter reached Mars, something went terribly wrong. Instead of entering a smooth orbit around the planet, it dipped too low into the atmosphere. Within seconds, it burned up and disintegrated. So what happened? The cause was almost laughable. One team of engineers used metric units, newtons, and kilograms. Another team used imperial units, pounds and feet. A mismatch in the software meant the calculations for thrust were completely off. That's right. Centuries of scientific progress, thousands of hours of engineering, and $370 million down the drain. Because two groups couldn't agree on whether to measure things in inches or centimeters. The mistake became legendary in aerospace history. It forced NASA to overhaul communication between contractors and teams, making sure everyone spoke the same language, literally and mathematically. It's often cited as one of the most expensive math errors in history, and a painful reminder, even rocket scientists can make very human mistakes. BP's Deepwater Horizon, the $44 billion oil spill, April 20th, 2010. The Deepwater Horizon oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico suddenly exploded. The blast killed 11 workers, injured many more, and unleashed one of the worst environmental disasters in human history. For 87 days, crude oil gushed unchecked into the Gulf. By the time it was capped, nearly 5 million barrels had spilled, spreading across 68,000 square miles of ocean. Beaches, wildlife, and fishing industries were devastated. The financial impact? BP faced fines, cleanup costs, and lawsuits totaling more than $44 billion. But the cost to its reputation was arguably even greater. Images of oil-soaked pelicans and blackened coastlines became global symbols of corporate negligence. And here's the kicker. Investigations revealed the disaster was preventable. Warning signs had been ignored. Safety checks were skipped. Equipment was poorly maintained. In an effort to save time and money, BP ended up creating one of the most expensive mistakes in history. The oil spill also sparked global debates about offshore drilling and energy safety. To this day, it remains a textbook example of how cutting corners in the short term can lead to catastrophic losses in the long run. Airbus A380, wiring disaster, $6 billion lost. The early 2000s were a time of fierce competition in aviation. Airbus wanted to dethrone Boeing with a bold project, the A380, the world's largest passenger plane, capable of carrying more than 800 people. Orders poured in, airlines were excited, the future looked bright, until it didn't. When engineers began fitting the aircraft's complex wiring system, 300 miles of cables in each plane, they discovered something horrifying. The wires didn't fit. Why? Because different teams in different countries were using different versions of design software. The digital models didn't match up. What looked fine on one team's system turned out to be impossible in reality. The result? Years of delays and an additional $6 billion in costs. By the time the A380 was ready, airlines had already moved on to more fuel-efficient jets. Airbus eventually stopped producing the A380 in 2021. The plane of the future turned into a financial nightmare, all because teams weren't working on the same page, literally. French trains were too wide. In 2014, France unveiled a massive plan to modernize its regional trains. The government ordered 2,000 brand new trains at a cost of about $20 billion. It was meant to be a triumph for public transport. But when the shiny new trains arrived, there was a big problem. Literally big. The trains were too wide for many of the country's older station platforms. How could this happen? The Railway Authority had measured newer stations when designing the trains, but they forgot that thousands of older stations were narrower. To fix it, they had to spend another $70 million modifying the platforms. The French public was merciless. Newspapers ridiculed the error, calling it the fat train fiasco. It became a symbol of bureaucratic incompetence, where nobody thought to double-check the basics. In the end, the trains worked, but the embarrassment stuck. And the lesson was clear. Before spending billions, maybe break out a measuring tape. Yahoo rejects Google. Back in the early 2000s, Yahoo was on top of the world. It was the go-to search engine, email provider, and news platform. Then along came a scrappy little startup named Google. In 2002, Yahoo had the chance to buy Google for $1 billion. Google's founders, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, were willing to sell. But Yahoo's leadership thought the price was too high. It's almost painful to think about today. Google went on to dominate the internet, creating products like Gmail, YouTube, Google Maps, and Android. Its parent company, Alphabet, is now worth over $1.5 trillion. Yahoo, meanwhile, stumbled. It missed out on social media, search, and mobile. By 2017, it sold itself to Verizon for less than $5 billion. That one decision, saying no to Google, is now considered one of the worst business mistakes in history. $1 billion may have seemed expensive at the time, but compared to what they lost, it was the bargain of the century. The Bitcoin pizza, a $600 million meal. On May 22, 2010, a programmer named Laszlo Hanyecz made history in Jacksonville, Florida. He was a cryptocurrency enthusiast, experimenting with Bitcoin back when it was nearly worthless. To prove Bitcoin could be used in the real world, he posted online, offering 10,000 Bitcoins to anyone who would deliver him 2 pizzas. Someone took the deal. Laszlo got his pizzas. At the time, those 10,000 Bitcoins were worth about $40. But as cryptocurrency exploded in value, that same amount would later be worth more than $600 million at Bitcoin's peak. Laszlo himself has said he doesn't regret it. Someone had to take the first step in making Bitcoin a real currency. But the internet never lets him forget. Every year on May 22nd, the crypto community celebrates Bitcoin Pizza Day, a reminder of the most expensive meal ever eaten. Samsung Note 7 exploding phones, $1 billion recall. In 2016, Samsung launched the Galaxy Note 7. It was sleek, powerful, and designed to compete with Apple's iPhone. Early reviews were glowing. But soon after release, disaster struck. Reports began to surface of phones overheating, catching fire, and even exploding. Videos spread online of Note 7s bursting into flames in cars, in homes, even on airplanes. The problem was traced back to faulty batteries. Samsung tried a recall and replacement program, but the replacement phones also caught fire. Eventually, Samsung had no choice but to cancel the entire product line. The cost of the recall? Over $1 billion. But the reputational damage was even greater. Airlines banned passengers from bringing Note 7s on board. Late-night comedians mocked the phone relentlessly. To its credit, Samsung bounced back with later models and stricter safety testing. But the Note 7 remains a textbook case of how rushing a product to market can explode, literally, in a company's face. Lehman Brothers, $600 billion collapse. September 2008. The world watched in shock as Lehman Brothers, one of the oldest and most respected investment banks, filed for bankruptcy. For years, Lehman had been heavily invested in mortgage-backed securities, bundles of home loans that were supposed to be safe. But when the U.S. housing market collapsed, those securities turned toxic. Lehman was left holding hundreds of billions in bad debt. On September 15, 2008, it declared bankruptcy with over $600 billion in liabilities, the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history. The collapse sent shockwaves through the global financial system, triggering panic that led to the Great Recession. Millions lost their jobs, homes, and savings. Governments worldwide had to step in with bailouts to prevent total economic collapse. Lehman's mistake wasn't just bad luck. It was reckless risk-taking, driven by greed and overconfidence. And the price wasn't just measured in dollars, but in human suffering. Kodak's digital camera failure, $131 billion lost. For much of the 20th century, Kodak was photography. The company's name was synonymous with film and cameras. At its peak, Kodak was worth $131 billion. Here's the twist. In 1975, a Kodak engineer named Steve Sasson actually invented the first digital camera. It was clunky, with terrible resolution, but it worked. It could have been the start of a revolution. But Kodak's executives buried the invention. They feared it would cannibalize their profitable film business. For decades, they clung to film. even as the world moved to digital. By the 2000s, it was too late. Competitors like Canon, Sony, and later smartphone makers dominated digital photography. Kodak filed for bankruptcy in 2012, a shadow of its former self. The company that invented digital photography destroyed itself by refusing to embrace it. A $131 billion empire gone because leadership was too afraid of change. So, what do these mistakes teach us? First, scale matters. The bigger the organization, the bigger the cost when something goes wrong. A typo in your grocery list is nothing. A typo in a stock exchange order can cost billions. Second, communication matters. From NASA's metric imperial confusion to Airbus's mismatched software, most of these disasters weren't about malice, but about teams failing to coordinate. And finally, arrogance kills. Yahoo laughed off Google. Kodak ignored digital cameras. Lehman thought it was untouchable. In each case, pride blinded them to reality, and the cost was enormous. At the end of the day, mistakes are inevitable. But whether they cost you a few bucks or a few billion depends on how you prepare, how you adapt, and whether you're willing to admit you were wrong. Which of these mistakes shocked you the most? Was it the exploding smartphones, the billion-dollar oil spill, or maybe the $600 million pizza? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the world's most expensive mistakes, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Weirdly Global, and hit the notification bell. Because here at Weirdly Global, we don't just talk about money. We uncover the weird, the wild, and the unbelievable stories behind it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.